next speakers are Richard Knoll and Joey Wunderlich from MakeCode. Are they? They're virtual? Okay. Because the backup plan was that if they were not here, I was going to call Aaron up. Aaron is responsible for dad jokes for the day. So Aaron, you got off this time. Next time, though. These are software engineers at MakeCode, and they are going to be talking more about blocks in docs. And you're up.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joey. I'm an engineer on Microsoft MakeCode. So today here we're going to be talking about blocks and docs. Richard's here as well in spirit. He will be. We have a recorded demo to play at the end from him, the Q&A. So we can go to the next slide. And then press next 3 times probably, I think, just to get through these ones. So we have, we're going to just be going over why we generate images of blocks and docs dynamically, why we do not just put in PNGs as much as possible. I'm going to give a quick overview of how we have them embedded in our tutorials. And we also have a quick demo of creating a tutorial with a game in it, just from Markdown alone. So we can go to the next slide. So why we generate images of blocks and docs. Next slide, please. Next. Okay, so we have a few different reasons. So number one is that they are always up to date. So if we change the wording of a block or if we add a custom field editor, we can push those changes without recreating associated images. This can be really important when we make the changes that impact lots of tutorials, and it's just a small wording change that doesn't really need to be updated. It makes it so we don't have things that are just out of date for years in our tutorial system. Oh, okay, something's up. So then the next part is that localization comes for free, and it's always up to date. So we have localization crowdsourced through Crowdin, which means that we're getting updates to localization every single day. By avoiding screenshots, the hints can exactly match the blocks that the user will be dragging into the workspace, no matter what language or high contrast mode they are in. And it makes it easier to map between the two. So the next portion is that it's easy to iterate. So when writing a tutorial, you can preview the current state without having to go back to the editor to manually capture screenshots. And tutorials can be shared with just a single markdown file, which makes it easy to distribute your tutorials and custom content. And then the last reason is that it gives a deeper integration with the tutorial system. The same code that is used to generate images can be used to filter the blocks used by the tutorials and validate that steps are completed. And we've also added in special annotations to highlight blocks or hide some that we don't want to show up. For example, if we have a function created in one step, we might want to just show the part that calls it in the next step, and we can do that all in one. One other small benefit here is that we can use the same tutorial markdown to generate blocks, TypeScript, and Python tutorials, which in reality, we typically end up making slight changes to the wording anyway, but at least the code can stay the same between them. And next slide, I think there might actually be one more in here. Okay, and it's easy to embed. So we provide endpoints for third parties to embed block snippets in their pages as an iframe, making it easy for them to get the same benefits of up-to-date docs with minimal effort on their end. Okay, that's the image for the first one. So I think those got out of sync when copying them over, but that's fine. So we can just skip over these ones, but these are examples of some of the changes. And I think this last one right here is an example of embedding the docs. So this is the microbit docs. They have a little organization over in England, not little, but big one, who we have a blocks editor for. And they use our API to embed up-to-date translations in whatever language they need in their documentation without having to do anything themselves as well. Okay, so we can go to the next slide then. So an overview of blocks generation. So this is pretty specific to how we do it, and our stack is a little bit different than normal. We have our own little intricacies, but we're just going to give the overall view of it. So if we go to the next slide. So the tutorial markdown contains TypeScript snippets. This is just standard little code snippet, so backtick, and a little blocks annotation. And so we embed the code right there. We use TypeScript as the base for most of our code. It's easy to read in the Markdown itself. And we also generate our blocks from TypeScript and use it as a source of truth most of the time. Let's see, next slide is good. So then the snippets go through our decompiler. Our decompiler here refers to our path for converting TypeScript code into Blockly XML, which is a whole talk of its own. I believe Richard's given one in a previous Blockly Summit. An important thing to note here is that we extract some extra information here from code, comments on the code, like the @highlight block to specify a certain block should be highlighted. Next slide. And then we render snippets from XML with Blockly. We extract them from the dominant workspace and we just generate the blocks. So if, okay, the images are showing up now. So this is what the code looks like in TypeScript. We generate that through our decompiler to create the next slide, which is the blocks representation, which is just Blockly XML. And then we do one more next slide. And then we just generate out a image of blocks with that up to date. Okay, so I think that is good for the start. So we can go to the next slide, and I believe this is where we're gonna do Richard's demo.
Hello there, my name is Richard Knoll, and I'm going to be walking you through how to make a tutorial in MakeCode's documentation engine. So first off, let's go over what tutorials are in our context. So I'm on our arcade editor right now, which is for making video games. And I'm going to go ahead and open up a tutorial. I've already selected one. This time flies. So when I click this, we're going to get a nice little experience where I can build up a program and I'm given step-by-step instructions on how to do it. So some nice things that we have that are kind of automatically in here is we have everything over here in the sidebar. If I click on one of these, it'll actually open up the block in the toolbox that I need to drag out. And we have hints that are block programs that show up. And just like the rest of our documentation, all of this is rendered on the fly. So these are not PNGs that we've saved with this program. These are actually things that can be live translated. You know, it'll change when we actually change block definitions or colors or things like that, so that we don't need to maintain a bunch of PNGs. And so like I said, it is a multi-step thing, and we even have some validation. So right now, I didn't add any code to my program, and so I get this little error showing me that I really need to add this and highlighting it for me. So let's define our own tutorial. And to do this, I'm going to load up the tutorial tool. So actually, let me go ahead and load this fresh. So here I have a just basic tutorial, and I'm going to switch over to arcade. And when I click run here, it's going to preview this tutorial in the right-hand side. So go ahead and click run. See, I have two steps. This one just has some text. This one has some more text, and I can click done. So that's nice, but let's say that I want to make this for an actual game, and I've actually made a game over here that I'm going to be converting into a tutorial for this demo. So this is a really simple game where if I press A, I'm throwing a pearl, it lands in an oyster, and here's my code written in blocks. And the way we get blocks into our Markdown is by using JavaScript. So I'm actually going to switch over to JavaScript, and I'm going to grab some code from my program that I want to use as a template for this tutorial. So this is the code that is going to be preloaded on the workspace for anyone who is doing my tutorial. So the way I'm going to do this is by doing 3 backticks to define a code block, and I'm going to give it a language tag that is template. Oops. Go and paste this code in there. And now when I click run to preview my tutorial, we're going to see that we have the same thing as before, but now we have template code that is loaded on the workspace. So we've automatically converted this JavaScript into blocks and put it in the workspace for the user. We've also filtered the toolbox to only include blocks that are inside this program. So let's go ahead and add, we're going to take this step 1 and we're going to add a hint to it. So for this one, let's go ahead and make it so that we are going to be drag out a controller A button event. And I want to add a snippet here that is going to show up as the hint for this step. So to do that, I'm going to do backticks again, right in blocks this time. And I'm going to grab the code that I want to copy over. So I want this controller A on event bit, and actually I only want the outer part for this step, so I'm going to delete this inner part. Now when I click run, I see that I get this little hint icon on my step. If I click this, I get this rendered block that shows me what I need to drag out. And you can see that my toolbox has already expanded. So this has just been a brief demo. This is scratching the surface of everything that you can do in our tutorial engine. And we have some docs. If you go to makecode.com/writing docs, you can actually find a lot of documentation on all of the macros we support, how to do snippets, how to do things like pop-up dialogues, or adding more blocks to the toolbox than are like normally available, and adding validation step by step like I showed before to make sure that the user has actually written the program as you expected. And yep, thank you so much for watching. That's it for me.
Perfect. Well, that's it for the presentation aspect, I guess. I believe we're on the Q&A, right?
Sure, yep. Any questions in the room? All right, virtual folks, now's your chance to add any questions to the chat, and I'll read them now. Let's see. All right.
I do have one.
Rachel has a question.
Yeah, I have a question, which is who? Okay, so the question was who's the target audience for that tool? So like who is using that to build tutorials, and how many people are doing that?
Yeah, I don't know if we have specific numbers, but we have a few folks who use that tool. And we use it internally for all of our content that we produce. So the tutorial tool is really meant for, educators. We have a few like hero teachers, for example, who will make their own little projects in it. And we have some also partner teams. So for example, the Microbit team, the Microbit Foundation, and the Minecraft education team who use that tool to make their content for various things. So that's who the tool is for. It's mainly targeted at content creators, so not necessarily technical folks, but people who are familiar with coding.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Question in the room, Becca or Neil?
So my question was is with regards to finding out the size of the blocks. So when I was doing live code generation for Blockly games, the issue that I keep running into is when the block renders in German, it's going to be significantly larger than the size of the screen, whereas in Chinese, it'll be much, much smaller. It'll be a postage stamp. Is there feedback, if you're using iframes, is there feedback so that you can adjust your UI or the host UI? That was an issue I had whenever I used generated blocks like that.
Yeah, so the iframe we use, we're not actually embedding the code snippets in an iframe. The iframe is just used to embed our stuff, which does the rendering. We can't do it just in a normal script because we need to have some sort of view that we can do the canvas rendering on. But anyway, so when you talk to our iframe, we send you back a PNG, and the snippet that we use to embed that in our docs scrolls horizontally. And vertically, we just embed, all the way down because it reads along with the text. But for the horizontal, we just have a scrolling thing. We've talked previously about doing embeds like a workspace. So being able to free scroll like you can in Blockly. But for smaller snippets, I think that was a interface that we weren't necessarily sure was a good idea, especially in our markdown context.
So what you're saying then is that they actually are PNGs. They're not uneditable read-only Blockly instances.
They are not Blockly workspaces embedded in the
Okay.
page. We render them all live and we convert them into PNGs, or they might actually be SVGs, but in any case, they are static images by the time that they're actually shown to the user.
Great, thank you. We have one virtual question and then we'll go to you, Becca. Mauricio asked, how extensible is this approach to be used with other programming languages?
So MakeCode is pretty specific to TypeScript and Python. Those are the languages we support. That being said, yeah, we don't really have any way to hook into MakeCode specific stack with like our own custom decompiler. That being said, I think you could use this approach with any language that you want. But the tough part is you need to be able to go backwards from the language to the blocks representation. And I don't know too many programming environments besides MakeCode that do that right now. So we have a pretty extensive compiler that'll take, any TypeScript or Python that you throw at that will, and, convert it back into blocks XML to its best of its ability. That's how we end up generating those XML snippets.
Great, and we have time for one more question. Take it away, Becca.
This is maybe slightly more of a curriculum design question, but I was wondering, do you have any documentation that is not in the form of tutorials, more of like the equivalent of API reference documentation that is like, this is what this block does, and do you use this feature for that as well if it exists?
Yes, we use the same rendering engine for all of our documentation. That includes reference, which we generate for a bunch of things. Well, they're all through to Markdown, but we have different ways of embedding the blocks to show the signatures and actually show the signatures in all 3 languages we support at once. So you can kind of cycle between JavaScript, Python, and blocks. We also do have courses that have been written for MakeCode in our various editors, and those are generally shown more in the format of lesson plans as opposed to tutorials. So when we embed things in there, we use this rendering engine, and they're just pages you scroll through as opposed to the tutorial step-by-step format that you have.
That is so cool. Thank you.
For those lessons, we can also convert them into a large PNG with a very hidden endpoint that we have, just to create a course book out of any of our docs pages, if you're interested as well.
I love
And
that.
we also use this for doing print previews. So when we do print previews, we use the same kind of rendering pipeline, but we actually apply some CSS to make it so it's all black and white. It's just outlines and then the text so that it doesn't use up all of your toner.
So many fun secret things. That's great. Thank you.